Normally, my videos are pretty heavily scripted or planned out, organized. I go through a lot of work to put them together, even if it's like something small or, simple, like playing through a game. But last night, I saw Return to Silent Hill on I guess it was its premiere night. I mean, reviews were slowly trickling in before I had a chance to see it, but who knows what premiere means anymore. And I saw a lot of talk. So naturally, I think that we have to take some time. And I took notes during the showing of the film. I actually had a very decent spot to sit down and take notes and go over my personal thoughts of Return to Silent Hill. For some background, I, for the longest time, was a Silent Hill poser. I'm going to completely, totally own up to it. And I still might be a little bit. Growing up, I think the only real Silent Hill games I actually played were Silent Hill 3 and 4. I would get filtered a lot by 1 and 2. Uh, I can't even say it was the controls on 2. I just, something about it. I couldn't, get past the first area or two. And so a large majority of my childhood consuming Silent Hill lore was actually through something called Channel Awesome. And they had content creators like Phaelus and Linkara who would review Silent Hill comic books and Silent Hill movies. And that's important because Silent Hill 2006 exists. It is probably one of the worst film adaptations out there. I've seen a lot of video game movies, and it's pretty bad. It's not boring, but it's really really bad. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind when we go into something like Return to Silent Hill. Anyway, so for the last year and a half, I've been undoing the sin and the burden, washing the blood off my hands, and becoming ingrained with the Silent Hill cult. Uh, Played through and beat Silent Hill 1, played through and beat Silent Hill 2, a little bit in, actually quite a bit in, on Silent Hill F, and then I plan on, finishing up 3. I'm actually, right now, going through Shakespeare because I keep getting stuck on the Shakespeare puzzle in Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill is it's a very weavy series. I promise this is all related to the movie. I promise. So when you're talking about this franchise and you're talking about this series, it's important to talk about the fact that, like, what the Silent Hill films, to my knowledge, previously tried to do is they would make really radical changes to character structure. They didn't understand what the games or stories were. They intentionally or maliciously couldn't convey things. There's an anecdote about the Silent Hill 2006 film where basically the lead, which is Harry, was just gender swapped solely for the purpose of like market relations. The director said something along the lines of like, well, it's not believable that the audience would relate to a daughter and a father, So it became like mother and daughter. Choices like that really color an audience's opinion of a film and a fan base's opinion of a film because it shows a lot. Like, there was a period of time where Pyramid Head was appearing in Book of Memories, and Pyramid Head was kind of lambasted because he was growing to become representative of what Silent Hill was rather than specifically of what, James's Torment was. So Return to Silent Hill, I knew nothing about it going into it. I didn't even know that it was going to be an attempt to tackle Silent Hill 2. And I do want to start by saying that there are a lot of things in this film that really impressed me. A lot of things. I don't think that saying that this is the worst film ever made is going to properly encapsulate that. I think that it is like disrespectful to a lot of people's hard work. Um, for one thing, this film has, in my opinion, the best environmental CGI or effects that I've ever seen for a Silent Hill film. This to me is perfectly capturing a lot of what Silent Hill looks like. There's a specific part in, I guess I would say, Silent Hill 1 and 2 where you are in sort of this sepia tone version of the overworld. I guess it happens in the carousel section and like Silent Hill 3 as well. And this sort of like combination of ash and brown and rust where it's not too overdone on the rust, right? It because I that's kind of the biggest problem that I have with 2006's is that it was just kind of like Rust City. I feel like that movie is mostly blue or this very, very like dull orange. And it doesn't really capture like the yellows. The color grading doesn't really capture like what those games were feeling. Um, and I felt like the color tone of this film was a lot more in line with that of the games. Like I felt not only were things being recreated shot for shot, and we can have a separate discussion on if that's lazy or dedicated. I could see it go either way. Um, but I was definitely impressed personally. It was interesting to see some of these things translated to film. It was interesting to me to see some of these things not only translated but then modified. Um, the first modification that this film starts to do is that if you have a film and you're basing it on Silent Hill 2, you need to take a step back and you need to figure out how you're going to keep the player moving along, or, James in this case. The difficulty with that is that if you've played Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill in general, you know that it's, completing puzzles and completing missions, and then you get like little circles on your map and it zooms in and it takes you to like this special area. And so the player is being informed through gameplay how, things are supposed to evolve and where to go and what to do. You can't do that in a film. That is a very specific challenge. And this film has opted to go about showing a couple things. For one, there are hallucinations that seem to be occurring for James, which are not too heavy-handed in my opinion. There's one that I would probably cull, where it's just a person standing in the silhouette of an apartment, or rather on the railway of the first apartment. I think it's too heavy-handed, but the things that I actually really like, in order for James to get the radio, he hears music, and that draws him in to, instead of the first monster, it's a homeless person. I don't know the purpose of changing the monster for the homeless person, because very shortly after this, he just kind of gets killed by the monster anyway. So it's questionable if that was really necessary. there are a lot of things where it's like, oh, that's like really, really clever. And then the film kind of goes about kind of undercutting it. Um, and we'll continue to go into that. Um, James in this film has a therapist, which I'm actually not too opposed with as a core idea. It could make sense. I think it could work. I actually do like I'm okay with the idea of the film taking place in modern times. I don't mind that too much. I don't think that that's a problem. I don't really find it to be too bizarre. I do question why it's there though, because all that really happens with it is he gets a phone call on his smartphone and then his battery dies, and then that's pretty much it for his usage of smartphones. He gets like 2 phone calls and then he, his phone is dead. I think he places another phone call before the phone dies, but like the smartphone is almost inserted into this film as a modernization mechanism to allow the therapist to have a wedge in. And I feel like that could have just been served by potentially, the the first thing is that he uh, gets thrown out of the bar at the start of the film. The cops get called on him. His therapist is notified of that, and he tells her with the cops, yeah, I'll be in session tomorrow. And then the second warning sign is that he doesn't show up to the first session. And then the third warning sign is she calls his home and he isn't there. And she calls it like twice, right? And then that's what causes her to call the cops on him. Um, I was thinking really hard on if this was going to be like spoiler heavy or spoiler light, and I think it's best to just you know go through the whole thing. Um, James being an artist is a very interesting choice for this film. Um, and Mary being his muse, I do think works. I don't I actually don't have any major problems with that. I think that a lot of what they do with this story of Mary and James kind of works. The problem is that there's not enough time for this to cook. Um, and there is a big problem that kind of adds onto this. Um, there's another element that is kind of introduced into this whole thing. Over the radio that James picks up, there's an announcement of a health emergency, and that's the reason that the town's evacuated. So I guess what we're to believe is almost that either the overworld is actually somewhat evacuated, but then he wakes up in the hospital, or that health emergency is just a part of his imagination. It's it's really unclear. I I think it's cool to have this health emergency thing there, but if it doesn't serve any purpose, then why is it there? Something that was like a neat detail is James running through the city at multiple points. Street names appear in them. I didn't get to see like them, like I couldn't freeze frame it, but it wouldn't shock me if they were the ones from the game because they specifically, pass by them in such a way that you're supposed to pay attention to them. And like I said, people going about saying that this is just a bad film and that there's, worst film ever made. I really don't think that that properly encapsulates little tiny details like that and like pieces of effort that, you know, made that sort of transition. You don't get something like that in film without, someone putting in effort. Um, it's very funny to look at notes in this way because you can kind of see in real time how things, as expectations come to light, kind of fall apart. I wrote a note about Maria and James, specifically notating about their chemistry being completely gone. How Maria has like no seductive qualities, her costume quality is low. As members of my cult might know, um, I myself have cosplayed Maria quite a few times. I did for my showing, and I put a lot of care into figuring out Maria's costume, a lot of research. So it was a little disappointing to see that the Maria that they opted for was rocking like um, basically a not Amazon quality, but her costume looked like the official costume.com version of Maria. It was very disappointing. I did notice that instead of just a regular that like they did go for a coin on her neck, so like kind of like a quarter, but it looked like it was like slightly bigger. But obviously I can't zoom in on a theater to like take a look at like what the costume design department did with that design. I just don't, the wig that they went with for her was not very good. And I don't think that her directing or her direction in this, if it was that, was very good. Um, I guess now is the time to pretty much say that this isn't a direct adaptation of Silent Hill 2. It is clearly trying to tell its own story. If you are someone who does not like that idea, you will not like this film. Like that, there's no saving that, even if you agree with me about the environmentals or anything I've said so far, like I think certain people might just want Silent Hill 2 forever unchanged. Um I think that Silent Hill 2 specifically has the most that you can do with these characters. There's a lot of room for expansion. There's a lot of room for interpretation, and there's a lot of room for taking your own shot at things. And I actually really appreciate that they did. I really do. I really appreciate that someone took a risk. Now, I'm sure that there are certain people who would go like, well, why not just take a risk on your own IP? So maybe you could have done that. But I like a lot of the risks that they take. I like a lot of the changes that they make. There are things that are like, they are somewhat member berries and nostalgia baity, but they are also ways of weaving in the Silent Hill like isms to hook James back into the story. It's very interesting to use a shot from Silent Hill, I think it was 3, of a chair, as like a visual cue that fans can recognize and put it into 2, even if it is kind of pointless. It's interesting to take the mannequin silhouette and cover it with moths and have that be the reason that James would go into a building. And fans of Silent Hill would know that mannequin is kind of iconic, right? It's so funny that I didn't make any notes about Eddie. Should I talk about Eddie? I probably should. Eddie is in this film. Angela is in this film. There is not a lot going on with Eddie, and it's kind of a huge bummer. It feels like maybe Eddie got cut. I feel very strongly that if there's a long form version of this movie, a director's cut, if you will, there has to be more about Eddie, because he kind of just appears in the bathroom, like you find him in the game. And then you have a modified version of him with Laura in the hallway. And then that's like kind of it. You never really see him again. So no like reference to, you know, any films, no fight in the meat locker, nothing like that. It's a huge letdown. Like I feel really bad because the things that I do enjoy are there, but then there are so many choices where it's like, if this wasn't here, you could have used this time to expand on Mary and Maria, and you could have had at your core a really fantastic interpretation of Silent Hill 2. It would never have been an adaptation, and I don't think I ever wanted one. I don't ever want something to, you know, attempt to replace it. But Eddie and Laura, they just kinda are characters that appear and then they're gone. You know, there's a little bit of Eddie talking about how people treat him strangely and how, you know, he's like not crazy, and like after James kind of bullies him a little bit. He doesn't even bully him. I think he says like, "Are you nuts?" or something. And then Eddie like kicks the shit out of him. It was very late at night. But going back to Maria, the reason that there's no chemistry between Maria and James is that they have made the distinct directorial decision that they are going to tell the story where James rejects Maria. I understand making that decision. I can see a story where that works. The problem is that we already have a film where there are quite a few characters that exist and don't really go anywhere. And you have they're introducing an element of complexity into Mary in this film by essentially saying that Mary is a cult member. This is a kind of a trope that the other Silent Hill films do too, and they're guilty of this as well. Like, for some reason, the cult stuff just keeps creeping into the non-culty parts of Silent Hill. Yes, there are parts of Silent Hill 2 that are culty, but Mary was certainly never a part of this, and she also was not a Lady of the Night, if my interpretation is correct of this specific scene that I'm referring to. And so, if you're having a scene where you're implying that Mary is, you know, kind of a hooker, right? And then you're also having Maria existing, and Maria is what she is, and you're having James outright reject her as a figment, and yada yada yada. It feels like a huge wasted opportunity, and it really makes me question why this deadweight character is there. It like almost serves as like a question of, you know, if James is aware of it, then is there any possibility that maybe there's something we, the audience, don't know? That's my cope. And the reason that I say that is because this film essentially has taken the role of making sure that James is almost on like a reboot path, right? This film is kind of a a time loopism of Silent Hill. It's kind of the smartest thing that it does. There's a lot of problems with it, but it's doing things that it almost makes me want like the commentary track. I hope that we can get one just to see what was going through their heads, because choices like making James directly Pyramid Head, right? So what does that mean? Like he's self-torturing, but then also he kills Maria in this film. He also like quite literally basically summons Pyramid Head to kill her in this film, which is completely different than this elevator scene in the game. So, you know, it begs the question, like, how much of this could possibly be manifested by not only this being a time loop movie, but a time loop movie where James has already been through the Silent Hill 2 that we saw. Unfortunately, the things that undercut that are pretty massive. Retconning Mary to be Laura and Maria and Angela, it's devastating. I you could have removed that tombstone, and you would have avoided so much damage, so much damage. I don't know who thought it through. I genuinely don't. If they had just cut the cult stuff, they could have just played it straight with Mary and Maria, had a little bit more of Angela, had a little bit more of Eddie, and still done the time loop stuff. Absolutely. And this would have worked great. Like it would have been so fine. But because of the mistakes that they've made, I think that is the huge reason that people are just like losing their lunch over this. Like I said, I personally really liked it. I would watch it again. Now, maybe it was sleep deprivation, right? Or maybe I have terrible taste, like I'm a trash rabbit ravaging through the dumpsters. But there was a lot to appreciate for me, that in spite of the bad, it's like, well, you know, I see what you were going for here. Unfortunately, I do. I do see the vision. Another bad thing that I think people are just going to point to is that the CGI on the people and the monsters is really bad. I do not know why they couldn't have just gone practical. They should have kept digital for the like vistas and environments, because that's great, in my opinion. You know, I'm sure I'm going to get some people who are like, "You're crazy. This is the worst Silent Hill I've ever seen." I think the Book of Memories FMV looks better. Why didn't they put the Letterman from Book of Memories in the movie? He had an opportunity to be there, and I would say yes, he should have been there. But these monsters with the CGI do not look good. Corpseified Maria does not look good. I don't know why Maria is ghouled up. It doesn't look good. They should have stuck to practical, even if it meant it not being the greatest thing in the world. They could have been very clever with how they shot it. They could have shot it a little bit like the game was. They have that attention to detail. By making it hard to see, you really wouldn't have paid attention to it. It would have been a little more tense. I guess that's another thing. This film doesn't really have tension because it's constantly being interrupted by flashbacks of James and Mary's relationship, and this therapist and past cult stuff, and there's not really anything scary going on. So I could understand someone who really, really likes Silent Hill 2 going like, what the hell? My horror movie. Oops, there's no horror in it. What happened? Where is the horror? Can someone help me? Um so I guess that's there's one more choice that I have notes about. Making Mary's illness, I guess, a byproduct of the cult. It's more cult stuff. They basically just say that Mary was drinking this drug to become one with the cult, to feel free, you know. And this eroded her free will and also eroded her body. Um, I, I think it's a mistake. I think that most people connect with Silent Hill 2 so deeply and personally because of, you know, that damn disease in our mind's eye resonates. It's like you don't need to say what it is. I think for most people, we probably just assume it's cancer because it's so big, it's so scary, it's so personal, it's so universal. But I think for other people, it could be like, I mean, it could be anything, right? We don't know. And I think like keeping it ambiguous, it isn't necessary to expound on it. It's not really needed. And I think that's kind of like the summarization of this film is that it inserts things where they aren't needed for probably a grueling 2 hour runtime for most people. I bet most people would trade cutting all that stuff pure and simple and just keeping it at 90 minutes. Whereas I'm like, well, let's keep the 2 hours and make the best Silent Hill 2 movie we can. Um, but anyways, I think that's my general thoughts on this film. Um, I'm really happy. Anything that can get me out cosplaying as Maria and enjoying more Silent Hill stuff. I am itching to play more Silent Hill, so you know that's something. And maybe the version of Return to Silent Hill that I saw was in a bizarre town and doesn't exist, and it's different from the one everyone else saw, and that's the reason I'm so positive. Versus, it's the worst movie ever. But I wanted to get my thoughts and opinions out in a form that was my own before, you know, the eternal internet hate machine ground everything into dust. If you hate this film, if you found no joy in it, if you didn't think anything of it was good, or you know, you think everything was bad, let me know. You know, I totally can see it. But for me personally, you know, it has a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong, but I do think that for me, it was interesting, and I welcome them taking a shot at it, even if it didn't work out. Have a good one, guys.